throughout 2020. Today we have a great speaker to kick off our year together. Eddie Wilson has joined us from Go Media. And Eddie's career path began in radio marketing and advertising, and I will say, his bio didn't say this, but I heard a really awesome story while I was sitting here at the table. I won't tell all of it, but if you are familiar with WSB, which I imagine we all are on the radio, he managed that at a very young age. So that, first of all, was very impressive to me, but also started my favorite Atlanta station, which was Q100, is now Q997, but we listened to that morning show, and so that came to Georgia because of him. So I thought that was kind of a fun fact to know. But I know that he and his wife live with their 3 children in our area, just north of Forsyth, but I said we claim that as Dawson. So he lives here, and that they've been in this area for a good while. He is now the CEO of Affinity Worldwide, and he also currently operates Go Media, which is here, and that's a full-service communications company specializing in broadcast production and marketing. And you may have seen some of their work if you follow our tourism social media, because they have done some videos for us in the past. His specialties are building processes that create sustainable business models, creating solutions for clients that marry the value of their marketing dollars with the value of a customer, and producing more customers in a limited market space or place with limited expenses, and seeing the brilliance in people otherwise overlooked, which I think we can definitely see the benefit of hearing from him today, because I think we all struggle with some of these things and always love to have a little inspiration in the beginning of the year. So if y'all would join me in welcoming our speaker, Eddie.
All right, let me just 1 second to get it set up here. Most of my speaking is done either nationally or internationally, and I've got a business in Shanghai, and I rarely ever, let's see here, how am I playing this? I rarely ever speak locally, and so I was in Shanghai, and I was speaking a couple months ago, and I rarely talk about the fact that I manage WSB because nobody in the world knows WSB except for here. And so she was like, "Why didn't you have that in your bio?" It's like, because I actually said it in Shanghai, and there was a lady that raised her hand, this little lady, and she said, "Hey," she said, "Is that WSB in Atlanta, Georgia?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Do you know Neil Boritz?" And I said, "Yeah." That's the craziest thing in the world. Somebody in China knows Neil Boritz. Anyways. But yeah, so this is just a little bit about me, and before we jump in, because I want to be practical, Affinity Worldwide is the company that I own that's located in Kansas City, Missouri. We own about 83 companies, and it's just a parent company. It looks more like a private equity fund. And then I've actually just sold, I think, 77 of those companies all in one fell swoop. So that happened just this past year. So I went from having close to 1,000 employees to having like 10. It's great. It's awesome. And so I was commuting every week between Atlanta and Kansas City, and so I am so thrilled to be slowing down and just focus. So I got some local business. Hey, Tim. I didn't know you're sitting there. Good to see you. And so I've got some local businesses, and it's trying to focus more on that. Go Media is obviously mine. It's been a passion of mine for a long time. I've had some ad agencies. One of them that I sold, I've got a nonprofit called Christian Media International, and I also do a lot of nonprofit work and have some ownership in a nonprofit called Touch of Life, orphanages and feeding centers. And then I partnered with Doug and brought another northerner south, and we partnered together and started Because Coffee. And so we're excited about that. But I did graduate from Ohio State University. That's the Ohio State University. I know we just got trounced by Clemson, but anyways, so I'll claim that I got my graduate work done at Emory, right? Like that's a little closer to home since I don't really go Buckeyes right now. So, but I did manage WSB for a period of time in my 20s. They were actually selling the station. They fired all the management, and they came to me, and I was leading the sales group, and they said, "Hey, do you want to manage it for a few years? You probably won't have a job at the end of the few years when we sell this, but we figure you're the only one that's interested in taking it." So I did, and was able to do that for a few years. That was the years that we brought Sean Hannity to Atlanta. Then he ended up over at WGST. And I actually developed a three-man team that placed Hannity on Fox News. It was that exit that gave me a lot of the capital that then began my investing career and a lot of the business startups that I went into at that point. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell. But as you can see, I'm really passionate about marketing and business growth. And I've started and founded a lot of businesses. But I use core basic business principles for that growth, and I use marketing to supercharge the processes that then are the underlying foundation for those businesses. And so I've handled all the marketing for Buffalo Wild Wings, a bunch of Procter & Gamble products like Tide, Pepsi, Subway, Mail America. I actually handled Pepsi while living in Atlanta. That's like a death threat. But anyway, so that's kind of my background. So I want to get very practical to you because there are basic foundational principles that I employ to really help my businesses. Now, first of all, if you add marketing or you really push hard and you don't have foundational principles in place, you can capsize the ship, and I've done that a couple of times. I've had businesses that have succeeded, and I've had businesses that have failed miserably. But I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I just kind of dust it off and get back up and keep going. You know, like I was the kid, and I don't see if some of you identify. I don't know who's in the room today, so see if you identify with this. How many of y'all learned to swim before age 10? Learn to swim. Okay. How many of you learned to swim by being thrown in the water? Right. Okay. So that's common, right? Like my dad jumped me in the water and said, you know, you'll learn, right? Well. Before that, the greatest part was, so being a true entrepreneur at a young age, this is how I looked at life. I gathered a bunch of buddies by the community pool, and I said to my buddies, I said, okay, does anybody know how to swim? No one knew how to swim yet, right? Our dad said not throwing us in the water yet. And I said, okay, does anybody think they know how to swim? And they were like, no. And I was like, so here's the deal. I'm going to jump in and try to figure this out. And if I don't, one of you go get an adult, right? Like, because, you know, like, I'm thinking, like, because I wanted to swim so bad. And I did. And I almost drowned. And one of my buddies pulled me out of the pool. This is like 6 or 7 years old. And then, when my dad threw me in at like 8, he didn't know I could swim, and I already had it figured out, right? So that's my definition of an entrepreneur, right? Like, oftentimes jumping without any plan B, just expecting that something great's gonna happen, right? And, which is awesome until you have a failure, right? Like, it's awesome until you jump into the deep end, and then you can't swim, and nobody's there to save you. And I find oftentimes the small business owners and entrepreneurs are that way. They will jump in. They're going to try it. They're going to go for it. And so I decided in my life, I got too much to lose, and so I've kind of created this basic core principles that I own or operate my business. And these business principles, I use in everything I do. Up until this past year, I owned a very large insurance company out of Kansas City. We're the largest insurance company in the nation for residential investment properties in the country, and thankfully sold that. Nothing like getting claims reports and, you know, at 2 in the morning with people's houses burning down, stuff like that. It's no good. And excited for that to be gone. But I took that business, and we went from about a $10 million business when I started that to when I exited, we were doing about $400 million in premium sales annually. So it went from about 10 employees to about 400 employees, and I use the same basic principles. It's the same principles we use in Because Coffee. It's the same principles we use in Go Media. And so I'm going to jump into that just to be some practical help to you. So for me, brand is everything. Brand is so important. And I know that some of you work for a corporation and you have no control, you believe you have no control of that brand. You believe that somebody set the tone for the brand, they created it, they created the logo, the aesthetics, they created the communication pathways, all that stuff. And I gotta say this is how I define brand. As I sit down and we still Go Media, Dave Jorgensen back there, raise your hand, that's Dave, he's our COO of Go Media. And when we sit down, oftentimes on a weekly basis with companies to start brands or to rebrand or to create new brands, I tell this little axiom, and that is, how many of you have ever tried a new church? Anybody ever tried a new church? Okay. So this is what a brand is. My wife and I, we got to Georgia, and we've moved in and out of Atlanta now for a few years, and we've been here now, I think now this time for 5 years. And but we'll try a new church, and so we'll go to that new church. Well, you can drive up and you can see the church sign, right? Like most people think, oh, that's the brand, right? Or you see the logo on the outside of the building. Some people take it a little bit deeper and they say, well, the brand is actually the pastor, the speaker standing up there delivering the message. Like, that's the brand. Or it's the people shaking the hands. And I'll tell you what the actual brand of a business is. When my wife and I and the kids are in the car and we drive away from that church, and I elbow my wife and I go, hey, what did you think? Whatever comes out of her mouth next is the actual brand. Because it's that lasting impression that's more than just a logo, more than just a sign, more than just a message, more than just communication, more than just relationship. It's all of that combined. That is your brand. And many of you think, well, I've been given a brand. I work for a larger corporation. I'm just at a branch, right? You know, and in the end, oftentimes you communicate and you are the brand more than anything else. And so it's always brand first in my mind. Oftentimes when you add marketing to a business and the brand is incorrect, you actually start to accentuate all the things that are negative versus all the things that are positive. I had a business one time that we really struggled with some customer service issues. You know, the customer service is very much a part of your brand. And the moment that you start bringing more customers into a situation where there's customer service issues, what happens? Well, all of a sudden you start telling the story to the community that you don't care about them. You're not there to service them. You're not going to help them, so on and so forth. And so ultimately establishing that brand. So brand is always first. Let me just give you a couple of quick questions, and you can take notes if you want. If not, no big deal. But number one, does your brand represent you well? Does your brand represent you well? Is your brand memorable? Does your marketing support your brand? So very, very important as you're thinking through this year, your brand tells a story whether you're there to tell it or not. Sometimes your employees tell that story. Sometimes the sign out front tells the story. Oftentimes in this day and age, your website tells the story far greater than any other voice in your arsenal. The website, and then social media, that dreaded tool that people, are always so scared of when they come to our office. Like, I don't think we do social very good. Social oftentimes in this day and age is the greatest voice, greatest mouthpiece for the brand that you carry. Does the brand represent you well? The first thing that you thought of, though, was, is it my logo that's on my shirt? Is it the logo that's on my car? And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that experience. One quick axiom that I also use a lot when I teach is I'm a huge fan of coffee, if you didn't know. It was my life's goal to have a coffee operation. When Doug and I met years ago, I had dreamed about having a coffee shop. I don't know why. I never thought about whether it'd be profitable or not. Until I met Doug, no one ever put the numbers on a piece of paper for me. But I wanted one. I just wanted one really bad. Tim Couch can probably tell you how profitable it is, or maybe the write-offs I get because of it, I don't know. But I think that, for me, coffee was something different. I wanted to build a brand. I wanted to build an experience. I love the story of Starbucks, and let me just kind of wrap it up for you in about a 2-minute story of Starbucks. Anybody enjoy Starbucks? Don't put your hand up. I don't because coffee. Come on. No, I'm kidding. I often will go to Starbucks, and because of the experience. Now, let me explain that to you. So, Schultz is the founder of Starbucks. He went and he sat in Tuscan villages for, I think, the better part of a year and just experienced coffee culture. He came back and he said, it's not that I want to brew the best cup of coffee, I want to create the best experience. So he said, people buy experience, people don't always buy coffee. And so when he was kind of creating his mantra, if you've ever read his books and have ever spent time watching some of his talks, it was never about the cup of coffee. So he came back and he created 3 things that he said would create the brand Starbucks. He said, number 1, when you walked in, the first thing he wanted you to experience was the smell. He said, I want you to smell the coffee, right? He didn't care what the coffee necessarily tasted like. He wanted you to smell it. Then he said the number 2 thing is I want you to see it. I want you to see the Tuscan village. I want you to see the colors, the experience, what I saw every morning as I walked from my little villa into the coffee shop and experienced life in Tuscany. And number 3, he said, I want you to be greeted by a friendly local neighborhood barista. that understands coffee and will talk to you the language that maybe you don't understand. Those are the three things. And not one of them said, I want to brew a good cup of coffee, right? Like, I want to make sure that we have a consistent product or anything like that, because he was selling experience. Let me ask you why. Well, the reason why is because, do you know what it costs? Do you know what it costs as far as a commodity to brew a cup of coffee? Any idea?
3 cents.
About 4 cents. About 4 cents. He told you, Doug told you. Ours is way more. We buy premium beans. We buy... That's right. Ours is about 13 cents a cup of coffee. But that's because we buy A-grade beans out of 9 coffee regions, right? And they buy C-grade beans. Yeah. True story. I shouldn't tell this. There's no representative from Starbucks in Dawson here, is there, right? Okay. And it's not their fault. But McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts actually buy a B-grade bean, where Starbucks actually buys a C. And because the roasting process actually will accumulate. Anyways, well, I'll get off all that, all right? And, I'm not trying to make enemies, trying to make friends. And so it really wasn't about brewing coffee. Now think about this in your own business. What is it that you're promising the customer? What is it that you're delivering? What is it that they want? Why do they come and do business with you? He said it was because he wanted you to smell the coffee, he wanted you to see the environment, and he wanted you to get a nice greeting from a local friendly barista. So then he walks in one day, store number 1, Seattle, Washington. He walks in and he kind of goes to smell, right? And he's like, what in the world? Starts throwing a fit. And anybody ever been to store number 1 in Seattle? It's a pretty cool place. And so he walks in, and it's the one store that he walks in all the time, even still to this day. I've actually seen him in that store. I may have stopped him a little bit, but that's okay. And so you've got him walking in the store. He's going to take in that first pillar, right? And nothing. He smells something else. And he walks to the barista and goes, hey, what's that smell? And she's like, I don't know. He's like, that's not coffee I smell. Like, that's not coffee. Like, what's that smell? And she said, we got a new sausage sandwich in. He goes, this isn't Bob Evans. Like, starts throwing, like, this isn't, I didn't spend a year of my life in Tuscany. I didn't spend, millions of dollars on sausage. He's like freaking out. And they spend close to $6 million on research and development to develop new foods that taste like sausage but don't smell like sausage, and they certainly don't look like sausage. We'll leave that alone, all right? Sausage is not supposed to be gray. But anyway, so I know this is really not me bashing Starbucks. I'm sorry. I'll go there and I'll buy you guys all Starbucks after this, right? Like, well, I'll compensate for mine. And so Doug, I won't really do that. I'll buy all of this stuff. But anyway, so then he walks in. Another day he walks in. And and this is because you're kind of supposed to smell the coffee, you're supposed to see the environment, you're supposed to hear it. Well, he walks in and he can't see the barista, right? So he's like looking around and he's like, what in the world? And so he walks over and he goes, hey, how are you going to greet all these people when you can't even see around the espresso machine? And she was like, I don't know, I've never been tall enough to see over the espresso machine. You know that he spent close to $14 million on creating a smaller espresso machine. They're the kind of copper-colored ones now. So the bean hopper is actually half the size it used to be, only holds half the beans. It takes twice the amount of work to fill the bean hopper, but why? Because he wanted a 4-inch shorter espresso machine so that his barista could see eye to eye with the people walking in the coffee shop. That's how important his brand to him was. Why? Because that commodity that cost him 3 cents, 4 cents, you know what the average cup of coffee is in Starbucks today? Or the average 1 cup? Last year, 2019, $4.86. $4.86. So, his experience actually sells a 4-cent cup of coffee, right? You add the milk and the sugar and all that stuff, who knows, for $4.86. One of the most profitable coffee endeavors in the world, right? Because he's not selling a cup of coffee, he's selling experience. People buy experience. People buy relationships. That's why I love banking local. I love going into the local bank. Why? Because it's great. I enjoy it. I love shopping local. Why? Because I get to experience what it is that individual has to offer me. It's important. I love the relationships that I have with local people. It's important for me to be tied in to my community. That's brand. So how does your brand represent you? let me give you a couple suggestions. Look at your brand objectively versus your competition. This is an activity that we do in Go Media. A lot of start outlining the competition. What do they do? How do they do it? How do they do it better? What do they promise and deliver that's better than you? And because in the end, what you don't want to do is go to the place where you start promising things that you can't deliver, because that's a false brand promise, which ultimately will capsize your business as well. Get feedback internally and externally. I still consult a Fortune 500 company today. I go in about once a quarter, and we talk about this a lot. And one of the exercises I did last year that was so much fun with him was I said, he wanted to rebrand the whole company. Now understand, this is a Fortune 500 company, so it's in the billions worth of revenue. So you don't just all of a sudden change the colors and change the scheme, like that's a long process with them, right? When we rebranded Subway it's been about 11 years ago now, it took us nearly 6 months to change the shade of green and add a little tiny leaf on the end of it. The leaf is gone now. It took us about 6 months to even make that choice. Why? Because a $1 billion brand, you got to be careful not to capsize it. Well, I was in there consulting, and I said, can we do a quick study? Can we tell everybody here, we're going to buy them a very expensive jacket or shirt. We're going to put that logo on it, and ask them how often they would wear it, knowing that the brand of the shirt or the jacket was actually going to be something they all desired. Did you know that over 40% of the people said it doesn't matter what type of jacket or shirt you give me, I don't want something with our logo on it? It was like, well, what do you think that says? That says that those people are not proud of the brand that you've given them. When your employees aren't proud of the brand you've given them, then are they going to be an ambassador for you? If they're not excited to have that logo and what it represents on their shirt, if they're not excited to put that pin on, that's a very important thing of study that you should do in your own business. Get feedback first internally and second externally. Create something you're proud of. Let me just go through this real quick. If anybody's interested in this, so I don't want to give you, this is how deep we go into brand, just so you understand, like there's a process and I love this. But Because Coffee is obviously a company that I'm invested in, I don't want to give you some of our other clients because it's all confidential work we do with them, but for us, I can give you this one, right? So this is how deep we go in. When Because Coffee was started, it was a deep, deep thought process. If you actually notice, the B in Because Coffee is actually, it's actually punctuation. You see a piece of punctuation in there? Can you see it? What is it? It's okay, but there's a secondary piece of punctuation, and that is, it's actually a question mark, right? So see the top part of the B loop that goes down into the dot? It's actually a question mark. When you combine an exclamation point with a question mark, it actually makes a formal punctuation called an interrobang. Anybody ever heard of interrobang? It's when you actually ask an emphatic question. So we're asking in this brand, why do you do life? The answer is because coffee. We also tie Because Coffee to the nonprofit that I have, so that the profitability of that company will ultimately propel the passions in life I have, and so I do that because coffee. Does that make sense? So it's both a question and an answer. Well, as we went through that, we dove deep into the color theory and all of that stuff, and so it was very important for us as we build brands to tell the story accurately. And we get really deep into it. We do all the different various logo variations with an artist and stuff like that. And because brand is really important to us, we talk about how to put it, where to put it, how on what colors to put it, and we go through all that stuff. If anybody wants a copy of the brand guide for Because Coffee, just maybe you could use it as a tool for you or your business, I'd be happy to email it to you. Let me give you a real quick email address. Actually, it's on my business card, I believe, in the center of the table. It's eddie@trigomedia.com. There's a blue business card in the center of the table. And I'll be happy to email this to you, just say you want the Because Coffee brand guide. But we go through all the variations of the brand. Why? Because the brand is so important. We talk about where to place it, how to place it, and that's our brand guideline. Our typography, we do a lot of typography studies and things like that. So the first thing you are doing is you're building your brand. The second thing you do is you need to build your reputation. Your reputation is a foundational step from your brand. I've watched so many companies that are not worried about their reputation, they're worried about their sales, right? So they'll sell, they'll push, they'll go, they'll work hard to get additional revenue in, not always understanding that that reputation will ultimately be the greatest roadblock for additional sales later on. That reputation is so important. So let me just give you some pointers. Some questions first is your reputation your biggest asset or liability? Are you overcoming the story of your brand in the marketplace? Or do you use it to tell the story? Because either way, you can still succeed. You just have to understand from what position you're communicating from. Is your reputation non-existent? In this day and age, sometimes that's the best. Building from a clean slate oftentimes is the easiest place to build. If you had a better reputation, then what? What would happen if you had a better reputation? What would happen if the community said great things about you? What would that do for you? Suggestions: have a robust social media program. You can't ignore it any longer. If you're ignoring it, it's impossible. You can't do it. You gotta play the game, all right? Have a robust social media program. You can do basic, simple things to do that. There's lots of blogs and things like that can help you with that. Build consistent bios and descriptions. You know, I find a lot of business owners like me that have a hard time telling the story of what we do. Because if somebody come up to me at any given day and said, "Eddie, what do you do?" I would say, "I own some businesses and I, have a nonprofit," and we have a hard time describing who we are and what we do. For me, I broke it down. If you look at my Instagram page, it says, I'm a corporate leader, I'm a brand builder, I'm an altruist, right? And it says I'm a public speaker. The 4 things that are ultimately who I am and what I do in life. And we need to get very succinct in who we are and what we do and what our businesses do. Build consistent bios and descriptions. That's LinkedIn. That's on all your social media, but it's also on your website. Make sure it's consistent between your social media, between your website, between all those things, because Google reads it all, okay? Spend some time and money on SEO and SEM. SEO, search engine optimization. SEM, search engine marketing. A lot of big firms, not like Go Media, we push a smaller spend on it with a more focused approach on organic, because you can actually affect your brand long term with an organic understanding of SEO and SEM versus always working so hard to put every dollar you have into AdWords and Facebook and all the SEM marketing. Does that make sense? If I'm over anybody's head, I see eyes glossing over when I start talking about that. So I'll move on fairly quickly from that. Spend a little bit of money. What's that?
You need a class.
Yeah, you need a class, okay. Well, that'll be next one, all right? And then prepare now for the disaster later. We do this thing that, especially in the Fortune 500 world and for larger clients, we say this: what's the worst thing that could happen to a customer? And what are we going to do now to prepare for it? Sometimes it's something simple, like Go Media. What would be the worst thing that could happen to a client for Go Media? Well, maybe they spend a bunch of money on marketing and get no result, right? Like, that'd be a horrible thing, right? Maybe it is they want an amazing video and we spend a year planning and thinking and then it doesn't deliver exactly what they want. And you have to start planning for the worst, not always the best. Sometimes we need to be realist about our business. I am a private lender. I own a business called the American Association of Private Lenders. I love to lend privately to real estate developers, and I'm a real estate developer myself. Well, do you know that there is some huge risk with real estate development and lending, right? Like that project could go belly up. That could be a very dangerous endeavor for me, right? So I don't always want to look at every project as if it's going to be the greatest opportunity. I have to look at it and go, what happens if everything fails, right? And am I willing to live with it? And what am I going to do? What about your business? Next thing is building leads. So you need to build your brand, you need to build your reputation, and you need to build your leads. Is in the small business world, my father's a small business owner. He owns an excavation company and a drywall company up in Northeast Ohio. And my dad kind of goes in these weird cycles. He always talks about it. But he doesn't ever want to kind of step into this world. So what happens is he either has a ton of work or he has a ton of leads. Does that make sense? And we go in these cycles where it's like, boy, I have a ton of opportunity in front of me, I just can't close it all. Or I got so much that I've closed that I'm totally not focused on the potential new leads coming in. Business today, in order to stay static, is we should always be putting a percentage of our time and efforts and energy on creating leads, whether we need them or not. Do you know the greatest customers I've ever had are the ones that I generated and I told them, I can't service you, but here's someone else that can, and I'll pass that lead off to someone else. You know what I do at that point? I create a potential customer for life because I'm willing to be open and honest with that customer, they'll come back. The second thing is I create a great relationship with people in the community that do the same work I do. I pass leads off all the time. Dave and I talked about this very specific part of Go Media the other day. I said, there is a part of Go Media I feel like we are overworked, oversaturated in. I think that we should have a lead partner. I think that we should pass some of these off to somebody else. You know, because in the end, that's the greatest service you can do for someone else. So you constantly want to work this side, getting the new leads coming in, and if you can't service them, you can't take them, be honest and real, and pass them on to someone else. So how do we do that? Are your leads keeping up with your needs? There are, in this economy, the economic cycle we're in, most people have more than they can handle. Unless you've just started up or you've struggled for a while, most people that you talk to in the business world today, a majority of them, tell me that we have more than we can handle right now. Especially if you're in the construction field, right? Construction, if you're a contractor, I mean, name me one contractor that isn't slammed right now, right? I mean, they're so busy. Why? Because the economy is moving, it's growing, we've got lots going on. But are your leads keeping up with the needs? Because there's a couple of key indicators why your leads aren't being generated. Are your leads keeping up with the needs? What's holding your leads back? Most people believe that the reason you don't have the leads, the potential new customers you want, is because you aren't spending the money. That's not always the case. Money doesn't always solve that problem. But communication always solves that problem. Does that make sense? True communication always solves the problem of needs. You think about it this way. How many of you have heard this, like, growing up, or you said it yourself, that my best business is word of mouth, right? Anybody ever said that? Okay. Anybody ever heard that? Okay. You all fall asleep? I know, the meal was good, and now we're like, oh yeah, it's getting warm. Is word of mouth. Okay. But most business owners will tell me, if I could just spend a little bit more on marketing, maybe I could create more leads. But you say that the best is word of mouth, right? So how do you generate more word of mouth? Well, you service that customer that you're doing. We don't always want to play for the long term, right? We need to play for the long term. And so what's holding back your leads? We need to get honest about that. If you have better leads, what would they mean? What would that mean to you and your business? Play that out. Let me give you a couple suggestions. In this day and age, data is your most valuable asset. I could give you a whole dissertation on the information age versus the technology age versus the industrial age. Today, cash is not the asset you need. Data is. When I sold my insurance company, the company that bought it didn't do the valuation based on how many clients I had or how much revenue I had. They actually did an entire forensic study on the data that I collected on those clients, and they based the value off of the client in the insurance agency, not the revenue that client generated. Why? Because savvy companies understand what data ultimately can turn into. Data turns into money in every situation if you understand what to do with that data. So I believe that you should collect all data. I have been a fanatic, and if there's been one key to my success in life, is I network voraciously. I never lose a contact. I'm always networking. I'm always reaching out. I'm always giving someone a lead. Somebody will call me and say, hey, can you help me out here? And I'm connecting people. I love networking. Networking is has been the key to my success since day one. But you have to be willing to collect that data and hold on to it. And when you collect that data and hold on to that data and it's accessible to you at all times, then you never lose opportunity with that data. So, for instance, Because Coffee, I'll use that one since that's our brand, and I'm not giving any other company's secrets away. But we collect every bit of data. I mean, like every bit. And we started doing it from day one. If you remember, before we ever served a cup of coffee, we were crazy on social. I wasn't, Doug was. He's the crazy one, him and Ty. I'm not the crazy one. And I would be really boring if you saw me on social media. But we were collecting data. Why? Because that's a potential customer down the road. We collected every piece of data. And after we served our first cup of coffee, and we started to establish ourselves, then we turned around and we had thousands of people already collected, and then we went after those thousands of people saying, you can come to the shop, you can shop online, you can interact with us this way, come and interact with us online. And if you look at our social media program with Because Coffee, it's so robust and interactive because we collected and captured all the data, right? And so capturing that data is so important. By the way, the cheapest advertising today is retargeting. And I can explain that if you email me, and I'll tell you about retargeting too. For time's sake, there's a company called AdRoll. That's probably the simplest, easiest one. AdRoll, ADROLL. You can put, I know you're going to gloss over, you can put a pixel on your website that then allows any person that ever touches the front page of your website to be retargeted. How many of you have ever been on Amazon and then all of a sudden what you looked on Amazon is now on Facebook telling you, make sure you buy cat food today, whatever. No, that's retargeting, right? Like you can do that. And it's the cheapest way to advertise. You get people to the front page, you pay a little bit, it's literally cents per click, cents, C-E-N-T-S, cents per click, and it's so cheap. So collect that data and retarget. Don't let them out of your phone. Constantly talk to them. Spend money on good data. If you don't have good data, there's lots of good data sources out there. I recommend, depending on what source, if you'll send me an email and say, hey, where do I get data? My industry is real estate or insurance or whatever. Different data hubs around the U.S. collect certain specific types of data, and you need data that's been scrubbed and actively scrubbed so that you're not sending out information to poor data. Have a process for capture and cultivation. Because coffee, again, if you actually sign up for our newsletter, I'm not telling you a secret, but if you sign up for the newsletter, you're probably going to get about 13 emails in sequence based on how you interact with the brand. If you come to the website, you'll get an email. If you go to our shopping cart, and you don't buy something and you exit out of that shopping cart, you're going to get a reminder that you left stuff in the shopping cart, right? And we automate everything. If the first thing you do is you sign up for the newsletter, it tells you all about Because Coffee. It's our indoctrination email, and that's all part of our captivation sequence, right? You're going to get 13 touches from our brand that'll ultimately, hopefully, get you to buy a cup of coffee or stop by the shop, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose. We want to sell coffee. And so, but that's what you got to do with your business, is understand there are steps to capturing, right, collecting the data, and then what are you going to do with it? How many times are you going to touch them? How are you going to touch them? What's the story you're going to tell? So that's the cultivation piece. And then lastly, become a thought leader. Here's where I believe there's so much opportunity, is that, that we, as individuals with unlimited potential of communication now with the advent of social media, need to start talking about the things that we uniquely have knowledge on. Do you know how many times I go to the internet and search for, I was in Ohio, my brother, who is a millennial, right, who's never changed, I'm a Gen Xer, just barely, but my brother's a millennial, true millennial, I mean true to the bone. And I walk in the garage, and I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm changing the brakes on my truck. Well, he's got like a 2019 F-250 Super Duty, jacked up, lifted, and he's got the tires off of his truck, right? And I go, what are you doing? I'm changing the brakes on my truck. You are changing the brakes on your truck, right? You don't even know how the lift kit got on this truck, And he said, yeah. And I looked and I saw an iPad sitting there, propped up, right? And he literally was sitting there watching a YouTube video, hitting play and pause. Okay. Oh, I need that tool. Hold on, we're on the Home Depot or AutoZone to get that tool. It's like, I'll be back. And I was like, okay. It's changing his brakes, watching YouTube videos in real time, right? Why? Because that guy who's teaching him how to use or change his brakes, he's a thought leader. He's teaching him something that he couldn't find anywhere else. What is it that you deliver, content-wise, that someone's going to watch and be educated on? One of the clients I have is an attorney out of California, a really large lending attorney. And I said, what is it that everybody wants from an attorney? And he was like, free advice. I go, well then why don't you give them free advice every Wednesday for 20 minutes? Does it really cost you anything? He was like, no. So he started getting on there and he was Ask an Attorney Wednesday. And they do 20 minutes with an attorney where they give free advice. These people line up now to ask him questions so they don't have to pay, $5 an hour or whatever he charges, Why? Because he's a thought leader. What is it that you could deliver? Deliver it through blogs, deliver it through social media, deliver it on your website, do podcasts, whatever it is, talk about it. Be the person that delivers that content and let people find you to ultimately tell that story. And then lastly, once you do, make a list of mid-range leaders, engage them. Engage on all platforms from your vantage point, that's social media, so on and so forth. And then if you really want to be a thought leader, plan on publishing about 200 articles. Think over the next 5 years, how do I put out enough content that people will find me and become that established leader. So that's basic general information on helping you with your marketing, your brand, and some business processes. I've got a few minutes. I want to just open it up for questions. I know I talked really fast, and so I apologize for that. But if there's anything deeper you want to go into for a few minutes, I'll open it up. Is that okay if I just open it up for a few questions? Okay. Nodding, some of you are glazing, some of you are sleeping. I saw you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
At what point do you advise a business to, say, bring marketing team in-house and make it internal versus hiring consultants?
Sure, so we get that question a lot, and obviously I'm in that space too. I have an ad agency that I can employ at any time, but I also have businesses that are big enough that they can support their own internal marketing team, right? So for me, what I look at, based on your business, now you're a medical office, okay. So what I look at is traditionally medical offices spend somewhere between 5 and 7% nationally on marketing. When I start looking at that marketing budget, if that marketing budget ever goes beyond what I could pay someone in salary, then I really start determining if I could bring somebody on just to do it all. A lot of small businesses really hurt themselves because they'll hire a marketing person when they could get it so much cheaper just outsourcing it to someone else. You know, most people think that my clients are all Subway and Pepsi. Most of our clients are small businesses that just can't afford to hire somebody, but they still need the expertise. Does that make sense? So depending on the type of business, there's some like real estate, a real estate office, an office like actually a brokerage, will typically spend on average about 12% of their annual income on marketing, right? So there's variations in kind of the scale of where and when to do that, but for the most part, I start looking at whatever budget you're spending. If you could actually hire somebody for that budget, then you typically can bring someone in-house and do a lot more organic and a lot more in-house stuff. So that's kind of my rule of thumb on that. And for my own businesses, that's the rule I employ. When I got my insurance company to a place where I was spending way more than I could on an internal marketing team, I started hiring a marketing team as opposed to outsourcing it. Yes, ma'am, great question. Anyone else? All right, well thank you guys so much, I appreciate it. There are some coffee samples on your table. I also have, if you are curious about how we get to brands, I brought a bunch of brand questionnaires. Both Ty has them and Dave has them in the back. We'll make sure this is how we get to how to create brands. So if you're interested in that, you can kind of check your brand against these questionnaires. We've got free cups of coffee in the middle, right? The cards are the free cups of coffee. And so make sure you use that. And go see Doug and Ty at the shop. Thank you guys very much.
Hopefully, as we kick off not only a new year, but a new decade, these questions and ideas kind of got you thinking about your brand and your business. I know one thing that we certainly value as a community and as a business community is really that relationship piece. So what impression are you leaving on your customers and other businesses? So anything that we can do in the coming months to help you with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I would say our number one business is connecting people with other people. And so anything we can do, please reach out to us. And don't forget, he said it too, but don't forget your free coffee card on the table. And hopefully we'll see you very soon. But thank you everyone for joining us.